Hey everybody, Scott Bryce here with Scott's Vermi-Adventure, and I am setting up a new worm feeding experiment. This is an item that doesn't usually show up on people's do not feed lists, mainly because you would just never think of giving it to your worms. But I wanted to try it because I wanted to find out for myself. What I have here is a mixture of shredded cardboard and Jell-O. And I want to see if the worms will eat the Jell-O. Now, I don't know what to expect. The reason being, Jell-O is made up primarily of two things besides artificial colors and artificial flavors. You have animal protein and you have sugar. Now, my experience shows that animal protein shouldn't be a problem. And animal protein in the softened form, I would expect the worms to get into here within a day or two, maybe 3 days, and devour it. However, sugar is a different issue. Sugar is sort of an unknown. Some people report that small amounts of sugar will increase the microbial growth in the worm bin. My experience has been that sugar acts more like a desiccant, much like salt, and that it's actually a preservative, and it will decrease the microbial growth in the bin. And so I don't know what to expect with the amount of sugar that's in Jell-O. Now, I've made this Jell-O a little bit strong, a little less water than you would normally use because I don't want this melting. Also, I'm doing this experiment in late February, so the weather is still fairly cold. So it shouldn't get hot enough to cause the Jell-O to melt. It should stay in its gelatinous form in the worm bin. So let's bury this in here. Get it down where the worms are feeding. We'll cover it up with some bedding. We'll leave it in here. We'll check on it in a few days. And we'll see if the worms will eat Jell-O. It has been 2 weeks since I put my Jell-O experiment in the worm bin. And let's take a look and see what we've got. So let's dig down here. This is my bin full of Jell-O. Let's flip it over and see. The first thing we notice is there are no worms in here. None at all. Let's take the top off and see what I've got. There are no worms in here. The Jell-O has gone moldy. If I poke around in here, you'll see there are no worms. The worms have not come after this at all. I mean, none whatsoever. I would give this a smell test, but I already know it stinks. It smells horrible. It's gone moldy. There's been no progress at all with this. I think I'll actually see one worm in here. Right there. One very small worm. He's the only one. I don't see any others. We can see him in there, right there. If I dig around in here, I won't see any others, I'm sure. And like I say, I'd give this a smell test. Maybe we'll go ahead and do it. Oh man, this is disgusting. It's one of the worst smelling things I think I've ever put in a worm bin. It is really bad. Okay, we have a couple more worms over here. So it's been 2 weeks. I have a few worms that have decided to maybe crawl in here. They're not really showing any interest in this. Now, with some foods, it takes a few weeks before they break down sufficiently for the worms to show any interest. That might be what's happening here. I really don't know. I'm going to stick this back in the bin and let this have a little more time, maybe another week, and maybe 2 more weeks. I'm going to guess, and this is just a guess, that the reason why the worms aren't interested is because there's a lot of sugar in the Jell-O, and the sugar acts as a preservative, much the same way salt does. I think I already mentioned that. Worms don't want to be in an area where there's a high concentration of salt, and I'm guessing sugar as well. It has to do with osmotic pressure. If you're familiar with that, if worms are in an environment where there's a high concentration of salts or other types of ions that are dissolved in the water, it will actually cause water inside the worm to be drawn through their skin and out of the worm, and will actually cause them to dry out. It will do the same thing to microbes. It acts as a preservative that way. It would be interesting to do another test with unflavored gelatin and see if I get the same results. But for now, I'm going to leave it in here and see if anything changes over the next week or two. Maybe the mold will change things. Maybe the sugars will break down. If the sugars break down into simple sugars, Maybe that'll change things. I don't know. It's a little too early to tell. But I'm going to leave this in here and come back to it in a little while, and we'll see if anything changes. Thanks. My Jello experiment has been going for 25 days now. I still don't have any worms in it. There's still quite a bit of mold, and it stinks really badly. And the question I've had all along is, are the worms avoiding the Jello, or are worms avoiding the sugar? So I've decided to set up a follow-up experiment here. I have in here, in one of my little containers, let me see if I can just pop this open. There we go. This is shredded cardboard and unflavored Jello. So I have no dyes, no flavors, and no sugar. All I have in here is animal protein. And so what I want to do is put this in the bin and find out, will the worms go, will they go after this with no sugar, no dyes, no flavorings in it. And if they will, then that will tell me that the worms will in fact eat gelatin. What they won't eat is sugar. And I suspect that's the case, so I want to find out for sure. So I'm going to bury this in here. Let's go down about the level where the worms are eating and stick this in here. And we'll leave this in here for a few days, maybe a week or two, depending upon how fast the worms go after it, or if the worms go after it at all. And then we'll see, is it the sugar that the worms are avoiding, or is it the gelatin that the worms are avoiding? And we'll see you in a few days when we find out. The gelatin has been in here for 25 days. If the worms were going to show any interest in it, they'd be in it by now. So let's take a quick look and see what we've got here. And you notice as I'm digging through here, I've got other food that the worms can eat. Oh, look at that. So the can't pick up that. Okay, there's a bunch of worms. These are eating onions, which are often on people's do not feed list. So here is the gelatin that I put in the bin, and we'll open this up. And one thing we'll notice is there are no worms in here. They have just not shown any interest at all. If I dig in here, there's no worms. I think I have like one. There's one. Okay, so what I'm learning from this is the worms are not necessarily avoiding the gelatin, but neither are they showing any interest in it. There's just nothing in here that they want to eat. In a way, I'm kind of surprised. Since gelatin is nothing more than animal protein, I thought the worms would be all over this, but they haven't been. And after 25 days, if they're not going to eat the gelatin, they're never going to. So I think we can conclude from this that gelatin in a worm bin, not a good idea. The worms will not eat it. Thank you for watching.